as we look at exercise 9.1, probably a little bit of the easier one. So I'm going to go through this fast. If I'm going too fast, please slow me down, okay? Looks like presented below are transactions for Molina Company. She sells large quantities to other companies and also sells products to the small retail outlet. Sold merchandise on account to Dodson for $5,000, terms 2, 10, and 30. Are we concerned with the 2, 10, and 30 just yet? No. That's nothing new. March 1st is nothing new. AR went up, sales revenue went up by $5,000. A few days later, Dodson returned junky stuff. Oh, and by the way, when we have a sale and when we're returning, remember this chapter we're not concerned with inventory and cost of goods sold. Okay, those are players, but not in this chapter. So we have sales returns and allowances. And then AR goes down by 500. Why? Do they still owe us $5,000? 4,500 instead.
The cafeteria at this time with your Chromebook. Freshmen to the cafeteria with your Chromebook. Thank you.
Remember, inventory and cost of goods sold would be players here, but not anymore. So I'm going to just kind of quit saying that because we know that this is just analyzing the ARs. What happened on March 9th? Molina collected the amount due from Dodson from the March 1st sale. So if we collected the amount due, what's going to be our debit? Cash. Why are we not going to get 5,000 minus 500? They paid within the discount period. So we're going to have cash plus our sales discount of $90 to equal the $4,500 credit. Why is it 4,500, not 5,000? They return junky stuff. Okay, so those three transactions we've been doing throughout our year. Okay, where do they get complicated? Molina sold merchandise for $400 in its retail outlet. The customer used his credit card. It's still AR. And I know a few of you had the credit card, what? But it's still AR. And we also added a 1.5 monthly interest rate to that for using that credit card. A separate transaction, a separate day. Why is it only a little wimpy $3? Because it's 1.5% of 400. Now notice right here, it's still revenue. This was the actual sale, but this was the credit card interest that we earned, the 1.5%. What can I still answer about this one? We got to keep rolling because we're going to get through a whole nother section today. Oh. Well, that could be an error too. That my stuff has errors. That could be an error then. So Molina sold merchandise in its retail outlet. The customer used his credit card. Oh, his Molina credit card. See, that's the big thing, you guys. It's a store-based credit card. Molina added 1.5 monthly interest. What is 400 times 1.5% times 1/12? Someone do the math. Someone do the math on a calculator. 400 times 1.5% or 0.015 times 1/12. I just want to know the number. 1 out of 12 months. So then do we get to 3? What I'm worried about is the key word there, monthly interest. So 1 month out of 12 months, I'm wondering if that's where it gets to be the 3. 1.5 monthly interest rate. Let's just assume this was an error, that it should have been 6. So we can move on in interest of time. Okay? Cool? Because this is the answer key. That it does have errors. Let's move on to the next one. Did we skip 9-2? But did you guys do 9-2? Oh, there we go. Okay. Presented below, are 2 independent situations. So like 2 completely different companies the way it looks? Yeah. On January 6th, Brumbach Company sells merchandise on account to Prior Inc. for $7,000 with terms. So there again, AR, sales revenue. Again, pretty easy. 7,000, that's what we sold. It's out the door, on account. On January 16th, Prior pays the amount due. Are we in our discount period timeline? Yes. So that wasn't anything too tough, was it? Do your answers check out? Okay. And that's really all for A, isn't it? Because there were no returns. What's going on in B? Again, 2 separate transactions. On January 10th, Andrew Farley uses his Paltrow Company credit card to purchase merchandise from Paltrow, $9,000. The key word there is it's a company credit card. We need to recover that. It's like charging it, only with plastic, okay? On February 10th, Farley is billed for the amount due. On February 12th, pays $5,000 of the balance, not all of it, just $5,000. Why is he not? There is no discount with the credit card, okay? Later than in March, so on March 10th, Farley is billed for the amount due, including a 1% interest per month on the unpaid balance. So what is his unpaid balance down to? $4,000. Okay. And how long has this been rolling? We're earning 1% of the $4,000. So that other one was definitely an error. Because this is what you should have gotten. It shows the math. Right? Notice it's not sales revenue. It's not sales revenue. It's interest revenue. We're earning 1% of the balance due. Let's do the last one. Or do you guys need some look time yet? Is it starting to click? Okay, good. Okay, 9.3, what do we have going on? We've got some uncollectibles. Now, what are the 2 methods you can do with uncollectibles? You can throw a dart, which is write off, or let the balloon deflate a little bit, and that's the allowance. Because when we write off, it's really tough to get air back in that balloon. Okay, so here's where I know a lot of you are confused with 9.3, so please let's all be really attentive here. The ledger of Costello Company at the end of the current year shows accounts receivable at $110,000, sales revenue at $840,000, and sales returns and allowances at $20,000. If Costello uses the direct write-off method, dart to the balloon, for uncollectible accounts, journalize the adjusting entry, assuming Costello determines that L. Dole's $1,400 balance is uncollectible. Bad debt expense, $1,400. L. Dole, you no longer owe us money. And as Jacob asked yesterday, how do I sign up to be L. Dole to not pay my bills? It's not so glamorous because there's going to be a long trail of bad things that will happen to you. We see this as an expense, just like paying the bills or paying for lights or advertising. We see this as an expense of doing business with bad people, hence the name, bad debt expense. B, let's look at this the other more GAAP-friendly way. If allowance for doubtful accounts has a credit balance of $2,100, journalize the adjusting entry, assuming bad debts are expected to be 1% of net sales and 10% of AR. That's why you're given net sales and AR. Let's start with number 1, because there's 2 options here. 1% of our net sales. We had $840,000 in sales minus what was returned, times 1% of that. That's the allowance for doubtful accounts. It's still a bad debt expense, but instead of completely writing these people off, this is the dart to the AR balloon. I'd write these little things in because they're really helpful triggers. Rather, this is just the deflated AR balloon, because we're hopeful we can still put air in it to get them to pay. Now that's taking a look at net sales, 1% of net sales, okay? Down here, we can take a look at what's our AR, still people who haven't paid. And then we're saying, okay, 10% of that. And it's using the percentage of sales approach. What can I answer there? It's a lot of math up there. Here was our, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right figure. Current year shows AR as 110 times 10% of that, minusing, where am I here? Minusing what's currently sitting in the allowance for doubtful. Yep, that's the current balance of the allowance for doubtful. So we're going to add another 89 to that. Right, and remember, an allowance for doubtful is a contra asset. So we have to subtract off like what's already there to figure out what the end of the year business is. Because allowance for doubtful, because it didn't say that there was a balance in A, or in number 1. Because number 1 is looking just at net sales. We don't care what AR has as for a balance. Because this is allowance for doubtful accounts is a contra AR account. When you're looking at sales, you're strictly looking at sales. When you're down here and looking at AR, you have to take into consideration its contra account as well. Let's go on to C. If allowance for doubtful accounts has a debit balance, before it had a credit balance. Journalize the adjusting entry assuming bad debts are expected to be 0.75% of net sales and 6% of AR. So we're going to do the same thing again, only with a credit balance or a debit balance this time, and you're going to see a plus. Let's start with number 1. Still the 840 minus what was returned. And the reason we don't care about its current balance is because this is sales-based. But down here, we're adding it because it's part of the contra account. But it's like it had a little pool of money to use, because oh gosh, this is tough. So the contra account typically has a credit balance, but we have to subtract off if there's something already there. And here it's still got a credit balance, but this time we're going to add something that's already there. This is tough. This is very tough. We'll keep going with it and it will start to click. Just get your numbers down. What do you mean, the last one? Okay. Keep in mind we have to get through, you guys made the decision to bump the test to Wednesday, okay? And then the midterm to the following Wednesday because of all of our extra stuff we have going on at school. I want to keep moving on. You have my notes from the lecture. You now have 3 exercises that have answers. I want to move on to the next section of the chapter, but pushing through, we're going to spend all of Friday working on problem A that goes through all of this again. And then over the weekend, you'll work on problem B that goes through all of it again, and then I'll review it. You'll have a practice test, and I think you'll be ready for the test. I think you're going to have a pretty solid feel of it. Okay. 9.3, find your 3 additional handouts that I gave you. So far in the chapter, we've only been talking about ARs, so customers who owe us money. Now we're going to get into notes receivables, in other words, known as a loan. Another phrase that goes with that is what's called a promissory note. Is this part in your notes? Yep. Okay, I had to really scrunch things. You don't have a lot of writing space this time. Companies may grant credit in exchange for a promissory note. So in other words, we're going to sell you stuff and we're going to give you a loan. We'll extend a loan to you, or a promissory note, or what's called a notes receivable. It's basically a written promise to pay a specific amount of money back on demand or at a definite date. Promissory notes may be used typically for 3 reasons. Write these in. When individuals or companies lend or borrow money, when a particular transaction exceeds normal limits, meaning, boy, this is a pretty big one. Instead of you being an AR, we're gonna extend some credit to you, give you a loan or a promissory note, or as an option to settle an AR, which you've kind of been learning throughout. Like when an AR kind of goes bad, we're going to say, okay, we're going to turn this into a loan. We're going to give you some extra time to pay it, but we're going to charge you some fees with it. So to borrow money, because a normal transaction's kind of out of the normal limits, or to give options to ARs, are why businesses extend loans to customers or other businesses. You should see the paperwork on your set of notes that go with it. You need to know two players. To the payee, the note is a notes receivable. To the maker, the promissory note is a note payable. So just like when we owe a business money, it's an AP to us, but to them, we're an AR. So it's the same concept, but I just want you to know that the payee is a note receivable to us. So we're paying, basically giving money or giving the loan. And then this is considered an asset. But to the other party, the people getting the money, it's a note payable or a liability, okay? And this is, it looks a lot like a check, but it's just basically the fancy official paperwork or certificate that goes with it, okay? It usually tells you the principal, the time, the rate, and just some fancy signatures that make this all official. Speaking of time and rates, whenever you get a loan, whether it's a mortgage for a 30-year commitment to paying for a house, or it's college, or it's a car, in this case it's a company extending a line of credit, you always determine how much the loan's going to be with these two players, how long, and at what interest rate, because this is not free. Notes are usually short loans that can be expressed in either months or days. When they're expressed in months, it's X over 12 months. When it's expressed in days, it's X over 360 days. You might say, whoa, 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 there's 360 days in a year, or during leap, 365, or during leap year, there's 366, like this year. The banking financial industry uses 360 as its divisible amount. Then to figure out interest, the face value of the note, or in other words, the principal, times the given rate, which is usually expressed in a percentage, which we would change to decimals, and then the time, whether it's months, days, or year, will end up being the money maker of the loan, or notes payable, or no, excuse me, notes receivable, or what we're calling a promissory note. All interchangeable terms over there. So if I go borrow $1,000 at a 4% interest rate and I say I'm going to pay you back in 6 months, that calculation is going to say, okay, not only do I need to pay back that principal or that face value, but based on the interest rate and how long I'm going to borrow this money from you, I'm going to have to pay you what's called the interest on top of that. Here's where things get a little bit tricky. Bankers and loan operations people have computer systems that do this for them. You're going to do it all by hand. To figure out days, this is really, really important. You always omit the date that the note is issued, but you include its due date. Okay? I'm going to say that again, because if you do this wrong, it's confusing to you. when you look at, okay, I'm going to borrow money today on March 2nd, and it's due in 45 days. You wouldn't include March 2nd in the day, but you'd include the day it's due in the amount of days. We'll try something out here in a minute. So here's some terms. If I borrow principal times the rate times the time, if you see days, it's divisible by 360. So it would be 730 times 12% times 120 over 360. If I'm going to borrow $1,000 at 9% over 6 months, what am I going to divide that by? How many months are there in a year? 12. So 1,000 times 9% times 6 out of 12. 6 months out of 12. And the last one, if I'm going to borrow $2,000, again, that's the principal, or what they call it in the last slide, the base value of the note. I have principal in my head, just because that's principal times rate times time. $2,000 times 6 times 1 out of 1 for 1 year. If it's going to be 5 years, it's going to be times 5. So what this means, that $730 note is actually going to be plus $29.20. So at the end of this 120 days, I'm going to owe $730 plus the $29.20 to borrow the money. Here's, again, the money maker for whoever is borrowing the money, a bank, you, whatever. Okay, my $1,000 note is actually going to cost me $1,045 after 6 months. And my $2,000 note that's due in 1 year is actually going to cost me $2,120. Before we get into the transactions, I actually want you to go to the last page. It's actually a calendar from last year. I didn't put 2016 because leap year's in there and I didn't want to get you confused. There's different ways to know how many days there are in a month. I learned a rhyme. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest of 31 except for February, and then it goes on to talk about leap year. Did anyone else learn that rhyme? I can tell you and every time I need to know how many days are in March. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. Okay, 31 days in March. Okay, most of you probably learned the knuckle thing, which I didn't, and I still can't get it. Like the humps have to do with the 31 days, so January, February, March, April, May. Okay, so there it tells me again, that knuckle tells me there's 31 days in March. If you think that's really annoying to learn the 30 days has September, April, June, and November. So how many days are in, let's say, July? 50 days has September, April, June, and there's 31 days in July. Do your knuckles tell you there's 31 days in July? Okay, or you can look on this handy dandy little sheet that I gave you to see, oh, July has 31 days. Okay, this sounds really dumb, but I want you to write a 31 on all the months that have 30, like just write, go to March and write 31 right over that little calendar. 30 days has September, April, 31 days in January, 31 days in May, and write 30 on all those months. But then February is just a total curveball. Don't ever account for leap year in there. Okay, so now let's just try this. At the bottom of that calendar, write, and I'm sorry, I don't have a blank slide, but I just want you to see how this works. Write the equation. Principal times rate times time. Let's put that in. Sorry, I don't have a lot of usable space here. Let's say you're going to go borrow $1,000. And the banker says, all right, I'm going to charge you an 11% interest rate. And you say, all right, I want to pay this in 45 days. So times 45 over what? 360, 12, or 1? Okay. So let's figure out right now what's going to be our interest rate. 1,000 times 0.11 times 45 over 360. What's that dollar amount? I have no idea. I don't have 1,000 times 0.11 times 45 over 360. 1375. We are going to round to the nearest cent or thousandth. Okay. So what if it would have been 13.751? 1375. What if it would have been 13.758? 1376. Okay, got that. So this $1,000 loan is going to be 1,000 plus 1375 equals, I'm going to owe $1,013.75. The big question is when? When? 45 days from now. When is that? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. That when is called the maturity date. It's when the loan is going to mature. So do I start counting 45 on March 2nd? Nope. Figure it out. Look at your calendars. Start counting on March 3rd, out 45 days. When is the maturity date for this $1,013.75 due? Include the day that you get to when you get to 45. Okay, yeah, I suppose. April 17th? Is that when you landed on 45? So just remember, you omit the day you took it out. So on March 2nd, I went and sat with the banker and said, I want to take out a 45-day loan. You do not count the second. You start at 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? And then whenever your finger gets to 45, you do include the maturity due date. Now there's more math you can do. You can say 31 minus 2, because there's 31 days in March. Okay, you can go that route too. But that's why I gave you a calendar. You'll have a calendar on the test. A lot easier when it's months. It's a lot easier when it's months. Okay. Let's try some transactions. Is this the first one? Are you yawning because you're tired or you're bored? Or both? Yes and yes. Okay. Calhoun Company wrote a $1,000 2 months 12% promissory note dated May 1. Okay, so the players are 1,000 times 2 over 12 times 0.12. I don't know if we're going to need that all or not, but let's see what it says. When you go get a loan, do you get your money like kind of right away? Usually they'll issue a check. Or, you know, if you're going to go get a car, they might not give you the money, but they might just write it directly to the dealership. Okay, but usually the money is right there in front of you. So NR, notes receivable, goes up by 1,000. Accounts receivable goes down. Now let's talk about why. I quit reading here. The words to settle an open account means basically Wilma. Wilma couldn't pay their AR. So the credit manager and maybe the vice president of finance maybe decided, instead of throwing a dart at you and writing you off, or even instead of putting you in that allowance camp, We're going to throw you a bone here, Wilma, and say, if we extend a loan to you instead, can you work on paying it over the next 2 months? We're going to charge you interest. And Wilma says, okay. So AR, this is like kind of wiping them out. AR is going to go down. They no longer owe us an AR. Rather, we're going to turn it into a different asset called a notes receivable. Pretty simple. Where's the 12% and 2-month deal there? That matters when they pay their bill. What's going on here? Walder Company lends Higley Company $1,000 on June 1st, accepting a 5-month 9% interest note. Okay, does this seem to be settling a bad AR? It doesn't seem like it. If Walder presents the note to Higley on November 1st, the maturity date, what is Walder's entry to record the collection? Here's what's going on here. This is recording the collection of the note plus the interest on the maturity date. So this is not the entry initially to give them the money. This is not the entry initially to give them the money. This is when we're getting our money back. Whoa, I thought we only gave them 10 grand. Why are we getting 10,375 back from them? Notes receivable went down because they paid their bill. Let's not call it a bill, paid the loan. They no longer owe us 10 grand because they gave us 10 grand in cash. And what's the other player? Interest, revenue. Here you see the math. Remember, this is an asset. And you might say, what, an asset's going down? Well, another asset's going up. Just for fun, I don't know if this is considered fun to you, but let's do the entry to let's do the original entry. Because this is the like the after story. Like this is when they come pay their bill. What would the original entry look like? Look back. I don't have anything on here, so you talk me through it. Okay. What was the original entry when Higley came to Walder and said, we want to borrow 10 grand? Notes receivable. Okay, $10,000. But we're not settling an AR. So from our perspective, if we gave them $10,000, what would be our credit? Cash. The original entry was cash of 10 grand. What if it had said Higley was defaulting continuously on their accounts receivable and approached us and said we'd like to turn this into a loan? What would the credit have been if it was a default AR? And it would be AR Higley. And it will tell you that. But let's just assume it was cash because it says nothing in here about a bad AR. So that would have been the original entry, and here's when they come pay their bill. Oh boy. Then we have a calendar year ending. Hi-yi-yi. Here's where things get a little complicated. So suppose instead Walder prepares financial statements as of September 30th. Okay, so this is kind of weird, but let's just say this is when their fiscal year ends. Is this little thing on your notes? Okay, so end of fiscal year. You might say that's a really weird time to have a fiscal year end, but whatever. Businesses can do whatever they want. Okay, we know that the $10,000 note times, what was the percentage? Sorry. Go back one. What was your percentage? 9% times how long? What was the time? 5 of 12? Sorry, that was really loud on their We know that we're going to get 370, based on this equation, we're going to get $375, okay? Because it came out on June 1st, but then, whammo, we have to do an adjusting entry here because we have revenue earned for part of it. So instead of taking it times 5/12, we're going to take it times 4/12 to figure what we did in the first 4 months. And then the fiscal year calendar switched, and then we have the next 1 month. It's kind of annoying, isn't it? So they're asking us at the end of September, what have we earned? Interest receivable of 300, interest revenue of 300. So they're just asking us 3/4 of the way through this loan, what have we earned? Why did I take it over 4/12 instead of 5/12? Because it was taken out on June 1st, June, July, August, September, and they are saying we want to see what we've earned in the first 4 months. Our interest receivable that's coming into us and the interest revenue we've earned. Yeah, so like right now it's March 1st, 2nd. 1 month from now is going to be April. You know, so you just kind of go June 1st to July 1st is 1 month, July 1st to, you know, so all of June, all of July, all of August, all of September. So months are a little bit easier that way. Who cares if there's 30 or 31 days? Do you think notes ever go bad? Do you think people, just like ARs, do you think they don't pay their bill? Yeah. Prepare the entry Wolder would make to record the honoring. I'm sorry, I saw honoring. I thought it meant dishonoring. Notes go bad as well, so hopefully we'll get to that. Prepare the entry Wolder would make to make the honoring of Higley's note on November 1. So didn't we kind of already do, oh, didn't we already do that? Well, but that's the 4 month, 1 month split. Because notice the date. Because we had the 300 over June, July, August, September, and the 75 for November. But keep, so this is saying, what if he paid us on November 1st, a little bit early? We got our money. The note is gone. Interest receivable went down, and then this is what's left. It's kind of a weird one. Here we go. Got a little ahead of myself. What happens when there are bad notes receivable? Assume that Higley on November 1st indicates they cannot pay at the present time. It's due here now. If Wolder does not expect eventual collection, it would make the following entry at the time the note is dishonored. AR now is going to go up. NR is going to go down. So we're turning it back into a receivable. What a hocus pocus deal. and the $375 of, interest receivable, or interest revenue is a credit. So what a hocus job here. Well, it wasn't originally an AR, but now we're saying, okay, we're going to turn you back into an AR instead of a notes receivable. But we are going to charge you the interest that you horsed around with for a few months. Wow. Some more homework. Like today, we'll go through this homework right away. Exercise 10, 11, 12. Thank you for doing what you could last night when you maybe had some questions, especially about the credit card stuff or lucky for us, the last section of the chapter is really easy. It's really short. It's doing a ratio. You guys remember doing ratios? Yeah, it's how fast are we turning over these ARs. So it's pretty easy. So I hope to get just a quick start on maybe problem A right in class tomorrow. We'll see. I can't promise. I'd rather spend time making sure you understand this. This is also on my website.